Any crawlers out there ready to venture to level 4 of the dungeon with Carl and Donut? Well, then stick with me for my review of the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook by Matt Dinniman. Hey there, book lovers. This book had everything that made me love the first 2 books in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series so much. And if you missed my first 2 reviews of those books, you can catch them here. And I'll also put links to those in the description as well. But this book also had a lot of new character interactions, which if you've seen my previous videos, you know I'm a huge fan of those in the books that I'm reading. But as always, this review will also have spoilers. I will put a spoiler alert tag wherever I can just to help viewers out with those. The Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook opens with Carl, Donut, and all of the other crawlers emerging at different points on level 4 of the dungeon into what is known as the Iron Tangle, which is basically this confusing knot of subway and railway train track systems that all of the crawlers have to not only fight their way through the monsters on the floor and survive that, but they also have to figure out the confusing maze of trains in order to find their way to the staircase that will lead them to the next level of the dungeon in time before the level that they're on collapses. So something I really appreciated before even starting this book is the fact that Matt Dinniman gives the reader an author's note that pretty much says, don't try to make the Iron Tangle make sense while you're reading. It's not important to figure it out while you read. The characters end up doing that for you. And there is a map later on that explains how it all works. I really appreciated that because that was a piece of world building that I might have tried to figure out while reading if I didn't have permission not to do that from the author. And that would have made me enjoy the book a lot less. I have actually seen online where people either love or hate this book in particular because they tried to figure out the tangle while reading. So definitely listen to Matt Dinniman on this one. Don't try to figure it out. He made it confusing on purpose. Just read the book. It will all make sense by the end. I promise. Just listen to the author. I will say that this book was a bit of a slower start for me than the other 2 books. And that could, possibly be in part because the Iron Tangle was initially confusing even without me trying to figure it out, because I had permission from the author to not have to, work on figuring it out. Even if I wasn't actively trying to, there was still some initial info to try to get through that maybe kind of slowed me down a little bit, but it did eventually pick up, which was good. And the pacing in these books are always generally pretty quick, especially as you continue through the books. So even though this one did start a little bit slower, the pacing does pick up in true dungeon crawler Carl fashion, as has been my experience with the first 2 books at least, to where you do feel like you're turning pages constantly. You're oh, I'm just going to read one more chapter. And then you get to the end of the chapter and the way he ends the chapter, it's like, well, I have to keep reading, to find out what happens next. That was my experience, especially once this one did pick up and I kind of got into the rhythm of not paying attention to trying to figure out the train system and the routes. So it is a little hard to not want to figure that out. But once you kind of fight that human nature to try and figure the puzzle out, it does pick up a little bit, from there and continue with that quicker pace that if you have read the other 2 books in this series, you are likely familiar with that. Just wanted to point that out because it was a bit of a slower start for me. And if anyone else is reading that and felt that way, I did push through it and it did it did get better and did get quicker and felt more like a dungeon crawler Carl book. I mentioned that we get a lot more character interaction in this book, and you've probably guessed that ended up being one of my favorite parts of this book. Carl and Donut end up using the chat feature to connect and meet up with other crawlers on this level, and there are lots of moments where there are groups of them all working together. That was really entertaining to read through and added some variety for the reader, because it's not just Carl, Donut, and Mordecai anymore. There are a lot more people that they're interacting with and connecting with, and just it's really entertaining and adds more spice, to what you're reading. They also have a crawler named Katya traveling with them. She ended up joining them at the end of book 2. She's not in their party. She is in a different party. They end up agreeing to help her level and learn how to use her class and her race's abilities while she's separated from her group. I initially did not trust Katya, and I think you're meant to not immediately trust her when she's introduced. And the reasons for that I won't spoil here, because they are pretty big. They are pretty big reasons, and I don't want to ruin the book for anybody. But I did end up coming to like her as the book progressed. She ends up being a very nice addition to the group, so I did appreciate that, and she just plays more into the added character interaction and the added dynamic that brings to this book, and that you're not just getting the same. While I enjoy the back and forth between Carl and Donut and the character development we get from their interactions and what you get from them interacting with Mordecai, it was really nice to have more character interactions with different characters and get to see all of the different crawlers all working together and interacting with Carl and Donut and seeing more personalities that way. So I really did enjoy that part. One of the new things that gets introduced in this book is that the leaderboard goes live on this level of the dungeon, because they're still also on a reality TV show. So those in the top 10 have bounties on their heads, and because of how well they've been doing, Carl and Donut are in that top 10. This introduces a new dynamic to all the crawlers helping one another, because Carl and Donut learn pretty quickly that they aren't able to trust everyone and have to watch each other's backs even more. Which, again, there are some things that I will not spoil in here, just because I don't want to ruin the entire book for someone. I want to give you guys a reason to actually read the book. But there are things that happen that kind of that help shape these characters, because it's a direct result of the leaderboard and those bounties and things like that. That was just a really nice dynamic and a nice extra piece of the puzzle to be added into this book. And I like that there's elements that get added in each book. I really like that the author does that and kind of just adds a little thing each time to make it interesting with each book. I mentioned that they are still in a reality TV show sort of setting where those follows, those favorites, those views are still being tracked and added, especially now to like the leaderboard. And those are still important elements. Like they are listed periodically at the beginning of like each of chapters, where you can see like where they rank as far as like how many followers, how many favorites, their views, all that sort of thing. It's still very much an important factor for Donut as a character. Like she's still very much focused on their image and what will get them more followers and favorites and views and like sponsorships and things like that. But it didn't feel like that was as big of a focus in this book as the other books. Like it was definitely mentioned, and there were definitely the usual parts that were focused on, but this did feel like more of a let's get all of the crawlers together, working together to figure out this massive train maze situation. So this was a very much more character focused than the overarching plot of they're on a reality TV like show sort of thing, which I was actually appreciative. Like there were, like I said, there were still those parts and there are things in there that are important in those scenes that, again, I won't spoil because they are more underlying important things that will be more important ongoing throughout the series. But I liked that he switched the focus a little bit and brought in more characters, because I feel like that is important as well. Especially for there are a lot of moments with Carl where he kind of feels, isolated, and like his psychological state is kind of comes into question a little bit. And it was good to see them all coming together and working together to kind of combat that a little bit. Where it felt like it was something that needed to happen in this book. And it happened when it needed to happen versus, constantly showing all the interviews and the reality TV stuff. And I really enjoyed the way Matt Dinniman kind of pivoted a little bit and made that the focus of this book. If you're like me, you're probably wondering why this one is called The Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. That's a pretty odd title. That actually gets explained pretty early on when Carl stumbles upon a book that looks like a useless cookbook, but is actually filled with helpful tips, tricks, and secrets from past crawlers in previous dungeons. He has to be careful to hide it from both his fellow crawlers and the cameras, but he's still able to use some of the info he finds to help his friends throughout the level. The book also serves as a reminder for him of who the real enemy is, and that being that's the aliens that put them all in this situation in the first place, not necessarily the other crawlers or even some of the mobs that are trying to kill them, because some of those mobs are just, they're put in different dungeon levels with like manufactured memories, so like they're in them of themselves also victims of the aliens who have like created this entire system. And it just helps him to remind him of the mantra that he's kind of given himself, that he's not going to let them break him. So it was a really good tool, again, for the author to throw in there, not only to kind of help him get out of some sticky situations in the book, but also just to kind of remind him and kind of, reframe his focus of who his enemy is and who really is the problem. And it's not necessarily the crawlers that are trying to, maybe necessarily kill him for the bounty that has been put on his head. It's not even necessarily the mobs that are also victims in this whole elaborate dungeon system. And again, I thought that was a really neat element to include. I'm always amazed at what Matt Dinniman can put in these books to just make it even more and more interesting with each book. So I really did enjoy that. Overall, I would give The Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook by Matt Dinniman 4 out of 5 stars. It didn't grab me quite as quickly as the other 2 books in the series because of how complex it was compared to the other 2, but I still really enjoyed it. I liked all of the character interactions that we got in this book, and I have a feeling that will be something that continues as I go forward into book 4 and beyond in the series. As always, the book ended on a cliffhanger that has me ready to grab book 4, and I can't wait to see what happens next in the series with that. If you have read the first 2 books in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, then you will definitely want to pick this one up if you haven't already. If you haven't picked up the Dungeon Crawler Carl series yet, and you are a litrpg fan at all or a video game fan in general, this is probably something you would enjoy, and I would recommend picking it up. Like I said, I am always amazed at the way Matt Dinniman is able to throw things and come up with things in each of these books when I read them, to keep the reader turning pages. I never know what's going to happen next. It's always a chaotic and fun and wild ride. And you will definitely have fun reading these books. That is all that I have for you guys for my review for this week. I have actually been reading a bit too much at one time to have finished anything for this week, which happens. If you've seen previous videos of mine, then you know that I tend to read more than one book at a time. And so rather than sharing anything that I have finished this week, I figured I would share what I'm reading this week with you guys. So what I'm reading is Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Mass. And this is a story of Alexis Hurt, who finds out that she is half Spartan and gains entry into the Spartan War Academy, where she will learn how to fight and hopefully survive in the Crucible in order to win immortality. So this is book 1 in the Villains of Lore series, and there are 2 books, both of which are currently out. This is a Greek mythology centered story set in a post-apocalyptic sort of future where the Spartans are constantly fighting the Titans. I'm enjoying it so far, but it is a little hard to follow at times because there's a lot of info to keep up with. And I'm not sure if that would be easier to do reading it physically, like in a physical copy versus listening to it on audio, which is what I'm currently doing. I don't know if reading it, and having a book or even in an ebook copy, would be easier, with all the information. Because there's a lot of like history and just specific info to keep track of that you just don't have access to when you're listening to it on audio. So that might be something to keep in mind if you would like to check this one out. But like I said, I am enjoying it so far. If you're a Greek mythology fan, it might be something you would want to pick up. For those of you interested in finding out what's next on the channel, be sure to be on the lookout for my review of Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. This is the story of Princess Odessa, who is unexpectedly chosen to marry a prince over her sister in order to seal a peace treaty, while her father secretly orders her to spy on the kingdom and uncover its secrets. It is book 1 in this author's Shield of Sparrows series. There are 2 books. Book 2, Rights of the Starling, is expected to release on April 7th. It is a romantasy that seems perfect for fans of the genre. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to share my thoughts with you guys on it, so definitely stay tuned for that one. Otherwise, that is all that I have for you guys this week. If you saw anything that you liked, enjoyed in this video and want to talk more about it, if you have thoughts on the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, if you've read those books, please feel free to share those thoughts in the comments. If you are interested or have read that Blood of Hercules book that I mentioned, please feel free to share those thoughts as well. I am always interested in talking to people about books that I have read or that I am reading. So I would really just love to talk to you guys about it. Please feel free to share those thoughts in the comments. But if you liked what you saw and you want to keep seeing more of it, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel for more content. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time, and happy reading!